Hey everybody, welcome to the Purpose People podcast. Today I've got a great friend and a great business, Snap Analytics, and David Rice. Welcome.
Thank you, Daryl. Yeah, good afternoon. Great to be here. And as always, it's a pleasure to be talking to you.
Yeah, so you haven't always been in data, have you? Or you've been involved in various different things, but to actually start your own business is quite a big journey, but you've also done some work in corporate. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about your story and about the journey that you've been on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the big goal in the early days was to be a professional footballer. I know you're a football man yourself, so sport was my thing in the early days. My degree, or the minor element of my degree, was in sports science. Business management was the major. So naturally, I went into running a data analytics company. In the early days, the plan for me was to save a bit of money and go traveling. I landed at a company called Northgate Arinzo, and just answering phones. It turned out my boss realised I was quite good at technology, so I used to build PCs and be a bit of a nerd as well as play a lot of sport, and ended up in a data role. And I just found it was something I was really passionate about, and I realised there was just phenomenal power and value in that data. And at the time, so this was 2004, so 20 years ago.
That sounds scary. 2004, 20 years ago. Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Just coming out of uni, and it's a very different world then, right? But I just saw this immense potential, and I got really excited. And as is my nature, I became slightly obsessed with unlocking the kind of power and the potential of data.
So interesting with sport, because sport is all about data. At the end of the day, I mean, I've watched Moneyball with Brad Pitt and telling the story about the Oakland A's and stuff. So
absolutely.
What position did you play as a footballer?
So I was a goalkeeper, but I think there's loads to be learned from sport about business. Collaboration, teamwork. You're in it together, right? Interesting. You mentioned Moneyball as well. So I actually saw Billy Beane present over in San Francisco last year with one of our partners, Matillion. So again, and it's a great story of data, right? How they should never. I think they came second in the league, I think, or they certainly reached the championship.
They got to the World Series final, and they just missed out. And then, remembering the story now, the Red Sox offered him an extraordinary amount of money to leave and join them, to be their data guy, and he said, I'm not going to leave there because it would mean more for me to win it with my team than to do it for someone else, which I thought was quite an amazing story.
Absolutely. I mean, he's a really inspirational guy. And, one of the things he said is he was always wanting to be the dumbest guy in the room. So he surrounded himself with people who were, smarter than him. And I think that was something that really resonated with me. In terms of leadership and, what is leadership about? I think sometimes people think it's about, the person that makes all the decisions and, it's more of a sort of dictatorship. Actually, he was a great leader and somebody that saw the potential and the power of data before others did. I think teams like Brentford in the football space have actually adopted a lot of those ideas and built a team around data.
Brighton, another one. They can't compete with finances, so they've got to think differently, which is amazing.
Absolutely. So I mean, it's a great example of where the two can actually come together, right?
So you're a goalkeeper, and obviously that's the biggest data there is. Don't concede a goal because you've got a good chance of winning.
Indeed.
And then you went to university. What did you study at uni?
So data science was my minor. Business management was my major. Obviously went on to start Snap and run a business. So I think it was always part of the goal. I don't think I was a particularly, in many ways, I wasn't a great employee because, I liked to I had so many new ideas and wanted to do things a little bit differently a lot of the time. And was maybe slightly alternate. And I think also in terms of like the way that big corporates are often ran. Now some of them do culture really well. But I think many of the organizations I worked with over the years really struggled with culture. You know, they had the right words on the wall.
Yeah.
One in particular, I remember, had their values up on the urinal, you know, on the wall in the toilets. And then I remember just looking at them going, the kind of behaviors actually that I witnessed in that organization and some others weren't really in line with my own values. So part of the motivation, I guess, for starting Snap is let's build an organization where we do culture really, really well, where we actually put people ahead of profits, and where we actually genuinely try and help others around us be successful. And I think that's what leadership is about. It's about elevating those around you. It's about letting go of your ego. Yeah. And I think, you know, allowing others to have a voice, because I talk a lot at Snap about crowdsourcing success, right? It's never about, it's not about me. You know, I work for everyone else at Snap. And I think that was the kind of business I wanted to run, where, you know, it's a real sort of, it's a collaboration. It's a very flat structure where we actually, we crowdsource ideas, and we get to a better place by having that constructive, collaborative dialogue.
So obviously we're talking the podcast about purpose people, and the thing is with data, it's not purposeful. It's created and not used properly, or not used to inform and make decisions, which is what you guys do, isn't it? Is to go after, find the data, put it into one place, and then people can start making, you know, informed decisions rather than guessing. So from that journey, or from that working out, what's the most impressive piece of data that you've seen in terms of a journey where it's made the biggest amount of difference?
Yeah, I think we've worked on, you know, a number of quite, you know, exciting use cases, looking at customer data and complaints, and actually being able to start to classify and categorize those to understand where there's issues with products. Some interesting stuff around energy consumption, and actually looking at, you know, ESG, environmental, social and governance, looking at where, so we work with a large manufacturer, helping them to understand where they're actually using energy across the factories, how they can actually start to switch to renewable sources, and where actually the biggest impact is. And I think going forward, there are more things in the pipeline at Snap around in the ESG space, and around, you know, actually helping to have a positive impact. So there's some really exciting use cases there. There's one I was going to talk about, but I'm not allowed actually. So we'll cut that.
No, it's fine. For me though, it's going back to that analogy of sport. As a result of data, people were then looking at players differently. So they were going for more about the benefit of the team rather than the benefit of the one, because if the one got injured, there's a whole load of data goes missing and not so successful. How does it work in your organization, where traditionally the more data geeky type people don't like working with people, and yet they're working in a team? How does that affect your culture? Because they'd rather work alone when in fact you're trying to build a team atmosphere.
It's a great question, and I think there's two ways it can work, right? Is number one is you find the unicorns, the guys who can communicate but also understand the tech, and there's not so many of them. And I think you know, when we are out looking for talent, we're looking for those people that can connect the dots, can build relationships, can communicate really well. We use the term consultants. You know, we're not just techies. We're actually consultants. We advise. We can, you know, have a conversation, and we can build those bridges. Because what you often see in the data industry is that you've got the techies who just want to build stuff, you know, and write code, and then you've got the business who don't care about code a lot of the time, don't really care about technology. You know, they want to reduce their month-end close process. They want to automate some of their processes and systems. They want to understand their customers better. You know, who are our customers? Where are they? You know, who's likely to spend the most? You know, where can we drive the best, you know, energy reductions across our business and become more sustainable? You know, that's what these guys care about. A lot of the time, people in technology just go, hey, look at this amazing code I've written, right? So you've got to bridge the gap. So you either find the unicorns. It's what we try to do. I think we've done a really good job of it. And I think it's part of the USP we've built at Snap Analytics is that, you're the guys I can actually have a conversation with that can also be the translators when we talk to the business. So you can actually translate that techie speak into something that's meaningful for me. So that's the first. The second one is just to have those translators there in the room as well, right? So
well, it's a different language in itself, right? So you've got people that don't understand tech trying to make decisions on tech, both client side and obviously operationally, like for your business. What's the value? Obviously you've got a set of values, but what's one common value that sets you apart to bring as a bridge? What value do you see in operation the most as a behaviour to make that happen?
Yeah, I think in terms of behaviour, I think it's humility.
Okay.
I mean, one of the things I always say is, we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. It's important that we listen. I think sometimes, particularly when you get particularly intelligent people, they want to tell everyone all this really amazing stuff that they know and how clever they are, right? And I think the key is actually listening, understanding, what is it you're trying to achieve? What is it that personally motivates you? Because actually, people buy from people, right? So, and certain individuals in an organization will have specific goals that they want to achieve and things they want to do. And, and sometimes it's people in the business that want to learn and understand the data, but they've not had the opportunity. So actually we can say, well, look, we'll actually take you on that journey. We're not here just to go and deliver a load of stuff. And, we're actually here to help to enable you and empower you to use some of these solutions to be able to derive more value. So it's really humility, listening, it's making sure.
I like that as a value purely because there's that opinion, and certainly I've had it, working with techies as well, and people, but they just don't understand. Yeah, but you've got a responsibility not only just to deliver the product, but communicate what you're doing. And not everyone wants to do that. It's like, well, I'm brainier than them, or I know more than them, and they just need to learn. The ones with the humility of the ability to communicate complex things simply, and that is a great quality to have in a business, because you're dealing with complex data that needs simple decisions. Is it a yes or is it a no?
Exactly. I worked on a very large transformation project. It was, I think they'd spent about £11 million on this project, this organisation over several years. And one of the architects on that project said to me, the problem isn't the architecture or the data model, David, it's that nobody understands it. And I said, stop and think about that, right? It's so complex, the way it's been designed and architected. Yes, it's very, very clever, but actually think about how we can simplify it, or think about how we can explain it so that people do understand it. Because it's very easy to point fingers and say, it's not me, nobody else understands it. But I think storytelling and be able to take the complex and make it simple is really part of what we do, and I think part of the challenge in the whole the wider industry.
Yeah. So take it. What's the normal pain point that people get to where they feel I need some different thinking on it? Is it data gets lost? Is it just no one does anything with it, or someone says, "Oh, we're creating all this data, we need to do something with it," or is it someone say, "Look, we need to track some stuff and we've not done it before"? What's the sort of pain point roughly where people get into connection with you guys?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a number of different flavors. I think one is we've got all of this data and we don't quite know where to start. Yeah. So everyone's saying, we need a better platform and some better systems to make sense of this data. We don't quite know where to start. So we say, okay, so we actually work with them to do something called a data strategy. We do something called a data value map, where we say, well, what are the organization's objectives? Yeah. Right. So it might be increase revenue. It might be reduce our carbon emissions. So net zero is a big one that you see in a lot of manufacturers, right? So what does that actually mean? What are you actually doing to get there? Okay, we're gonna put solar panels or build a solar farm, or whatever it might be. And then you can actually, so that is really a data use case. Well, where are you going to put it? Where's it going to have the biggest impact? You've got 10 factories. Where are you going to start?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's start to look at the data and understand where we can have the most impact. Are there other things that you're doing? Well, yeah, actually, we're looking at efficiency of those machines because some of them are quite old, use a lot of energy. Okay, well, let's start looking at the gathering OEEs one that they use in manufacturing, operational equipment efficiency. So, this line is actually using much more energy than that line, but it seems to be producing more. Okay, well, it's because we put a new, widget in there, 3 years ago, and it's actually a bit more modern, and it's not, whatever. So again, these are data problems. A lot of them around. We want to, have 1 million customers within 3 years or whatever it might be. Okay, that's a data problem. Who are you targeting? Where are they? Who's likely to, buy your product? What is it they're looking for? So can you actually, gather data from those customers around what's good about your product, what's not so good about your product. Look at different demographics. Almost every business growth or business objective, in my view, and I'm super biased because I work in data, almost every one of them you can map into a whole load of data use cases. So I think that's always one is, look, there's so much data, so much information, there's so many things we want to do, we don't know where to start. So, well, let's look at the objectives and see what's going to have the most strategic impact for you. The other is sometimes more technology-led. We've got a data platform that's creaking at the seams. It's under somebody's desk on an old server.
Been there.
Yeah, you see all of these things. So actually, we want to move to the cloud, and we are a company that was born in the cloud, right? We started the business in 2019 when cloud adoption was really accelerating. And we said, we partnered with a company called Snowflake, which was a really revolutionary data platform and still is. But it really changed the game, and it was part of my motivation for starting the company. I thought, with the evolution of the cloud, with new cloud data technology coming along, this is a game changer in terms of, in the old days you would have had to have gone and bought extra storage in your data center, and it would take an extra 3 months for someone to
plug it in,
procure it, and plug it in. It's infinite now. You don't need to do anything. You've just got as much, storage as you want. Just load as much data as you like. Now that comes with a downside in that people just keep firing data in sometimes. But if you manage that, you haven't got to worry about that infrastructure anymore. If you want it to go faster, you just switch your instance in Snowflake from a small to an extra large, and all of a sudden, you've got a 8 times increase in performance instantly, just like that.
It's a big change.
So the whole dynamic of the industry kind of shifted, and a lot of people at the time told me, Snowflake's never going to take off. It's never going to compete with the big, the big vendors in the space. But I knew that technology really genuinely
would make
shifted
a difference.
The game.
And
they've gone on to do phenomenally well.
So in terms of like data and managing it and stuff like this, one of the things that obviously people struggle with is the sense of losing data, for example. So have you come across an organization where they've just lost everything, and it's almost like they're dealing with the pain of all these years of information they haven't got their hands on, and then almost putting things in place? Have you ever been in that scenario?
Yeah. So, well, we're talking to a prospect at the moment that's had a data breach in their organisation, and it's had a large commercial impact, reputational impact, and I think putting processes in place around how you mitigate that going forward is really important. And again, I think didn't necessarily lose all of the data, but it became compromised. And I think data security is a massive area of focus for us and also all of our clients in the enterprise. It's there are so many scams and phishing, activities going on at the moment, and it's all it takes is to click on a link on an email or so. And I think the cloud actually also addresses some of those concerns around security. And again, that was on premise. And back in 2018, 2019, people were saying, "Oh, we're not ready for the cloud, and it's not very secure." My question to them was always, look, do you trust Microsoft? Or do you trust Barry in your IT department that sits in the corner more? Who do you think is going to put in place a more robust, resilient architecture and encryption and all of those kind of things? Because I know where I'm going to put my my chips.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, of course. And I think that's the thing I found with data, and particularly with tech, that for cost and for various different reasons, it's trusted to a mysterious person that doesn't get on with anyone. And then the whole business is at mercy to this one person called Barry, let's say, where no one understands how he's got it, but he's almost could strangle the performance and the optimization and the success of an organization, just because if it does collapse or Barry decides to move on, there's no one else that knows how to do anything with it. And I think when you talk about these bigger companies, the reason why you're recommending them is that you spread the risk. If someone leaves Microsoft that's managing, then they find someone else that does, for example. And so there is a point, particularly when you're handling big data, that you mitigate risk by giving it to bigger people. Yes, you'll have someone managing it, but having your whole business running by, a bedroom bandit, let's say, that's a really scary place to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there's just, aside from that, there's a lot of stuff you don't have to do anymore. Right, in terms of the way that a lot of those security things are automated in Snowflake, as an example. There's four different layers of encryption that are just there natively, right? And you go, well, if you wanted to apply that to your own on-premise system, you've got to jump through a lot of hoops. So we talk about maximizing the work you don't have to do.
Yeah.
Right. So there's all this, if you go back to the old world, you've got to do all of this. We can actually just start focusing on your data. Yeah, so we can actually just focus on pulling the data in and start making sense of it. I would say around 40% of what we would have done 5 years ago doesn't have to be done anymore.
So that's quite interesting for me, because I look at it and I go, well, as you grow and as you adopt new technology, there's new technology coming almost as quick as having just implemented the last lot of technology. So how do you almost stop the constant need for continual investment in new tech and almost plan? Because I think that's probably the difference, isn't it? We're very reactive around data, whereas what you do is no, let's respond to the needs of the data and let's plan accordingly. So, for instance, if their growth is, if they want to grow their company by 100,000 clients, that's great revenue-wise. But have you got the staff to facilitate it? So, do you find a lot of planning now? Do you take a lot of people through planning first in terms of the journey that you're on, or is it more fixing what they've got in the first place?
Yeah, I think in terms of future-proofing. So yes, technology is evolving at a really rapid pace. So I think when organizations are looking at the solutions to solve a specific problem, kind of encourage them to look a little bit further ahead. Right? Yeah. So rather than say, yeah, okay, that's fine, you're looking for a dashboard to solve that problem, but are you looking for a platform that can be deployed across your organization? Are you looking to use large language models? And you look at what ChatGPT has done in the market. It's really shaking things up, and people are really starting to realize the potential and the power of data. To be able to look, hey, I can ask a question and get an answer. I can generate an image just by, and we've spoken about this, right? Yeah. We did a bid together around for Innovate UK, right? So I think, for me, it's about looking at, is there a platform that serves me today, but also serves me in the future, and what's coming down the line that I might want to do, and what are the capabilities I might want to leverage in the future. So yeah, very, very much so. There's it's almost like a 5-year cycle, I would say. Yeah. What might I want to do in 3, 4, or 5 years.
Yeah.
And is this going to enable me to do that? Because I don't want to be sat here in 12 months or 2 years saying, hey, look, we've spent a couple of million quid on this, but actually you need to go and do something else, because that's not a great place to be.
So you obviously into data, understand it, worked on it, and then decided to start a company. What do you think has been the biggest shift from you working in a company to running your own? What's the biggest shift that you've experienced as a human, as a person?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I've learned a huge amount, phenomenal amount about. I started when we started Snap. We myself and Tom. I think you met Tom Darrell.
Yeah.
So we decided that Tom was going to be the sort of delivery machine, and I would be almost everything else, right? So HR, I would be sales, finance, and actually. So you learn a little bit about each of those functions and areas. So, but on a personal level, I think building relationships and trust. One of our values as a company is trust. I think, we always start with, and again, I think I used the word humility earlier. Building trust, listening, being transparent. Being open and honest about the positive stuff and the negative stuff. I actually think, people are more likely to come on the journey with you if you show vulnerability.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because basically in business, it can be very transactional, but the thing that makes people make trust, and particularly with data, is having that relationship where you can be open, and it's not all perfect. Someone said something to me today, which I thought was quite good. Perfection is not a great place to start, because you can never really attain it. You can aim it, but you can't promise someone it's going to be perfect. Exactly. And particularly large numbers and large data and all the components that come with it, it's not going to be a smooth ride, really. You've got smooth processes, but the ride might not be smooth. Just think about Formula One, for example, and their cars. They've got all the technology, they've got all the money, they've got everything that they need, but it doesn't always go smoothly. One component could be off, but they've got a hold to say, well, in this course of a season, it's going to get tough at this point, but at this point we think we're going to succeed.
Yeah. Well, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, isn't that what Mike Tyson said? And I think that's something I've learned in business as well, is that you're going to get punched in the face a few times.
Yeah.
COVID happened shortly after we started the business. We started in October 2019. I think it was in March 2020 when all the lockdowns happened. It was around that period. So again, we found ourselves at one point with our contract was being canned because of COVID, and things were not looking good.
Yeah.
And then as it happened, I remember I was actually cooking a curry at one point, feeling very sad and sorry for myself when I got a phone call from Tom saying, we've just had the green light for a 12-month contract to actually look at some of the finance analytics and actually the impact of COVID on a large CPG business we were working with at the time.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing I've learned is you need a bit of luck, right?
Yeah.
We could have been in exactly the same position and not had that particular piece of news, and things might have been very, very different. So, I think we've done a lot of things right, but I think we've also been very lucky. And I think having gratitude and being grateful for that, and staying humble along the way it's really, really important.
It's quite weird. It's like when you said to me, one of the things your data people need is humility. As much as your business is growing and it is successful, but you can see the trajectory of where you're going, you demonstrate humility. So I just want to say that. And the reason I say that is it's like I can see a value being lived that's not often lived. It's just, as you said, it's on the urinal door or whatever it is. Whereas, that sense of humility, you've never got carried away. You've working with some big clients and big players, but you've never gone like, here's my t-shirt, this is what's on my arm, and we got this, whatever. You're like, I'm building the team, I'm still learning, it's a bit uncomfortable. Maybe that's our relationship. You can tell me on the phone. It's like, it's a bit uncomfortable in this space, and we've had to make this decision, and we're trying to do this. And that's what I really like about you as a company, and obviously know Tom as well, is that it does, in a sense, the character of the business reflects the character of the person. And I think if you're talking humility as a value, you can definitely see it with you and the team that you work with.
But and I think you always need to be. I think the moment you get greedy, and the moment your ego starts to take over, I think that's when things go wrong. So Jim Collins, Good to Great. If you look at the research those guys did, what they actually found is that the most successful business in the long term had leaders who were very humble. And I think, I don't think you can fake that, right? I don't think you can manufacture that and go, right, I better be humble. It's, I think it's something you learn on the journey through adversity and through the kind of, challenges you've been through and all kinds of things that shape that, right? I think, what was interesting is those big, charismatic, loud, kind of more dictatorial kind of leaders. They had some short-term success, but it rarely lasted. I think, people stop believing and following and trusting and actually they'll probably make decisions that they go, well, I know this is right. And you never know anything, right? That's another thing that
it's having the humility to go and find the data, for example.
Exactly.
Like just to say, well, hang on a second. It can be a decision of your gut, and maybe it's got you this far, but let's have a look at the data and let's just see if that gut instinct is just more of a circumstantial decision versus actually what's the real picture telling. And I think it takes a humble person to ask those questions.
And I think there's always someone around you that is more experienced or has done that and lived it. And I think seeking out those individuals, going back to Billy Beane and Moneyball, be the dumbest guy in the room.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, I think you're going to have a successful business. It sounds counterintuitive, right? Yeah. But I honestly think if you always make yourself the dumbest guy in the room, I do pretty well at it. But I think, you will always end up in a better place and get a better answer. And I talk about crowdsourcing success. Mm-hmm. I think that's what Snap's about is let's collaborate, let's work together, and let's kind of, really crowdsource success for us and for our customers.
So obviously, you want to make a bit of a step change in the marketplace. Obviously taking people onto the cloud, consolidating data and that sort of stuff, and dashboards and stuff. But for you, what's the motivation behind everything that you do? Is it freedom? Is it to spend more time with the family? What does that look like? Because those questions rarely get asked. But actually it goes back to that humility and vulnerability, that if you can be open about who you are and why you're doing it, people are like, I want to work with that guy because I know why they're doing it. So what about yourself?
Listen, so, I've got 3 kids and, and part of the motivation is around family, to give them a financial security, give them a better life, and inspire them as well, right? To help them to believe that, if there's something you want to achieve, take a bit of a risk, go for it.
That's great. It's about inspiring the next generation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Out of your children, is there any one of the 3 that you look at and go, I could see them starting something, or they've all got the entrepreneurial thing about them or not?
Definitely my eldest. He sort of comes home from school with £15 notes, having sold Pokemon cards, and he seems to constantly be saying, can you put this in my Go Henry account? Where did you get the money, son? I think
got the entrepreneurial gene.
He's definitely got the entrepreneurial trait. It's good. Sometimes I'm like, do the school know about this? He's like, I don't think so. And I think, I'm still proud of you, even though I should be saying don't do that. So no, I think I can definitely see a bit of myself in him and his sort of technical kind of expertise. My other son Harry is probably more like me in terms of his character and kind of very, well, he recently diagnosed with ADHD, actually.
Right. Okay.
And so he sort of has all these great ideas, and is very he's quite a bouncy, charismatic little chap who and I think so whilst the eldest has got the business side, I think I also see a bit of myself in Harry. And interestingly, when we went to see to get the diagnosis, they gave us the sheet, and there were all the sort of various traits of ADHD on there, and I sort of sat looking at it, and I could see the lady sort of, and she was sort of nodding, and I said, "Is it?" And she said, "Genetic, yes, it's it definitely is. It's amazing how many parents get diagnosed." So I'm self-diagnosing here. Probably something I shouldn't do, but you look at my school reports and things, and David was looking out the window and not listening and concentrating and focusing. Yeah. But I have that hyper focus. I think Harry's the same. When he's into something, I remember once a couple of years ago, decided he was going to memorize the periodic table. Test me, Dad. Test me, and you can do it.
But it's going back to that, because like Microsoft have learned very early on, haven't they, where they've got like a department of autistic people, particularly doing a lot of development work in an area, and they've educated the entire organization. They're saying this is seen as a negative, but in our industry, this is seen as a massive plus, and they've embraced it rather than gone away from it.
Absolutely, and I find neurodiversity fascinating, and I think if you look at the stats, you're 500% more likely to be an entrepreneur if you've got ADHD, and yet we treat it as though it's some kind of disorder, or in the school system it's sort of special needs. Actually, I think it can be a superpower, right? But it's learning to counter those traits. I'm very, very lucky. I found a co-founder that is very process oriented. Really thinks and considers risk carefully. And is maybe slightly more measured than I am. Whereas I'm very much, I've got all these fantastic ideas. Let's go and do this exciting stuff. And actually, you need that, right? You need that sort of, I guess, more sort of, visionary side of things. But you also need the I think it's harder, the job that Tom does. So he heads up our delivery team. I think what he does is orders of magnitude harder than what I do. It's the process, the rigor, the consistency, the detail, and I think that's where that's where the limitations, I think, are sometimes. But I also think the ability to build relationships and get people invested and get people excited. I think part of
it's the reputation. It's a reputational data that Tom's managing. Can you deliver? Are you delivering? Is it making sense? Is it your data is engaging, having loads of conversations and turning those conversations into clarity of need and then ultimately conversion. But I think they're different skill sets, and I think you're right. Organizations that are successful need both to be successful because they're at different phases of the journey. For me, I think over the course of the years, I've recognized that personality, in terms of their personality and character, it's just as important where you place them as well.
Absolutely.
Because you could put an ADHD person in charge of, let's say, managing the regular client stuff, and they just keep forgetting stuff continually. Yeah. And you're like, well, that's not what you want in that place.
You don't want them running your finance function necessarily.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But you'd put them in your sales team.
Exactly. And I think it goes back to the whole Microsoft thing, is that they recognize that there are needs in this department to deliver X, but we need a certain type of person for that. And that's why I personally think the school system fails, not recognizing the different personality traits. Neurodiversity is something that's starting to emerge as we get a bit more intelligent in that area. But it's also, does the system or the way of teaching, it's not one size fits all. So how do we help those people? How do we help those people? How do we help those people? I'd almost have a like educational options that help. So on the next level, you've got A levels, you've got T levels, you got your BTEC, so to speak, apprenticeships, or you got university. Those options are there, but I think it needs to go down again. So like if you're more academic, you'll probably go down A levels in university. But if you're more doing stuff with your hands or you learn through doing, then you might do an apprentice. So that's, I think we kind of got there in a way. We kind of know that it's a journey. But I think the school system, the next tier down, we can make those decisions a lot earlier and say, that person sat in front of or sat at a desk all day is going to drive them crazy.
Yeah.
Let's find something else for them to do. Let's get them out. Do something else.
I can't remember. I think it might have been was it a Mark Twain quote? Don't let school get in the way of your education.
No, that's a good one.
And I think it's a good one, right? I feel like when I left school, that was when I started learning, because I could focus on the things I was really interested in. And I think, again, that is a ADHD characteristic, is that hyper focus for something that you're really interested in, and if that's not maths or science and it's DT, or if it's business or whatever, I think having those opportunities. I also think making things real and relatable. What I always really massively struggled with, copying teachers who would write on a whiteboard. Or it was blackboard back then with chalk, wasn't it? And they would just write and you would copy them. And that was, nothing. I learned absolutely nothing from that process, because I wouldn't even read it a lot of the time. I would just copy it. It wasn't going in. And I think, there's different people learn in different ways. And I think we're getting there, like you say. I think we're getting a step closer. But I think the things we celebrate sometimes, academic success, meaning you're good at maths and English and science, actually, like you say, if you're a great communicator, if you're popular amongst your friendship group, actually, even if you're not good at those other things, that's probably a good signal that you're going to be able to build relationships. You might go into sales or, a kind of pre-sales type role where you're actually engaging and talking to people.
And that's it. For me, it's about the aspect of leadership. Like for instance, you see someone that's always good at gathering people together, and that they just naturally do it. They're the person with the football, and everyone wants to go and play football with them, and they're organising the game. It's like, well, there's a project manager. If I've not seen,
exactly.
But it's almost like the education system doesn't see it that way early enough. It's like, well, they go to the careers day. What do you want to be? Oh, I want to be a teacher. And then they just laugh at you, Ollie, that's his story. And I'm thinking, but surely a teacher would have seen, if they were educated the right way, say, he's got these traits, actually it's that. And if we were asking those questions at maybe like 11, 12, 13, rather than 15 and 16, I think people will leave school or go and find the right thing to do. Because, I've been doing these podcasts now for quite, I've done, I think, this is probably, we're getting close on 100 podcasts we've done. And everybody that's educated, or, even through to school, they've pivoted. The thing that they trained to do, they just went and done something else. Very rare that they actually stick to the thing that they're going to do. And often it's because they've recognized that I'm really good at this and I could do something with it. So those people stick with it. But not everyone does. They don't end up doing, I'm working in sales and I realize I hate selling, I'm an introvert and I don't like talking to people, like asking them to think, and then they find they're better doing something else, and they wasted 6 years in a sense doing the wrong thing, getting exhausted, getting burnt out before they realise this is what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, we've just hired a head of applied AI, and he he was head of machine learning at Barclays. He did a number of chief data officer roles. I was very, very successful. And then he said, hey, I'm going to start my own business. And when I spoke to Isaac, he said, a few months in, he said, what? I realized I love the data side of things. I love solving problems. And actually, when you start your own business, a lot of it's about selling to start with.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to go out and sell. That's not my character. It's not my nature. I find that difficult, and I naturally veer towards this thing and AI and technology, and that's where my passion and enthusiasm lies. So, I guess even later on in your career, you still trying new things and pivoting to the things, and ultimately where hopefully you end up is the things you enjoy. And I think you asked me a question about what I've learned. I think it's that the CEO role isn't what people think it is. It's a lot of PowerPoints and Word documents and contracts and actually, it's not as exciting, and a lot of it is just head down, getting the things done that need to be done. And I think that's it's tough, right? It's graft. I mean, you've been there and done it. And I mean, how many companies have you got now? You must have about 50 now.
It's quite funny. My team bought me a cup, and on the cup it had, "Is it done yet?" Because that was talking about CEO. That was one of the main question is, as a CEO, the hard thing is you're taking responsibility of the organization. In a sense, you're delegating responsibility, but then you're at mercy to your team to deliver, right? Absolutely. And so hence is it done? Because I want to know that it's done, so I know that my job is done. And I think, you're right, it's not always easy. And I think I think you shift from, as a leader, having to do it yourself. I just do it myself because it's easier to do it. And then you have to go back to that trust thing of trusting that you've got the right people in the right place. So there's a problem, but rather than you dive in as superhero, you just say, well, let them solve the problem, and so there's a different conversation.
I don't know about you, I find that hard.
It is hard,
and I'm getting there.
Because you can almost come across as uncaring. It's not that you don't care, it's just, if I keep solving it, and I know I could, if I keep solving it, then I won't be able to do all the other things I'm supposed to do. So it's how do you coach people to ask the right questions and say, well, this is what was agreed, but how was that agreed? Why don't you just go back and re-ask that question? And then they, that's what they meant. So the clarification is, I'm trying to read the situation to get the clarification, when in fact you could just ask them and get clarification of them and don't need to speak to me.
And again, I'm very biased, but this is a data problem, isn't it, Daryl?
So,
if your market is done when it's complete, show me the results, and whatever the definition of done is. But
I think that's it. You talk about running multiple businesses and stuff like that. I think the thing is that I've learned that I've got to. It's as much about the person that you work with, and as in the people in the right places with the right skill set, with the right personality. And there are certain aspects of the business that need more of an entrepreneurial mindset, purely because they are emergent. This is new. For example, when we first started the podcast, naturally I had entrepreneurial people doing the podcast because they were learning it. Now one of our videographers, Ryan, he's moved to Australia, and so we've got Rob that's come in, but Rob's run his own business. He's had trained countless people. In fact, he trained Ryan, and now we've got someone that's build, process, build. So he's going to enable us to scale, to grow this thing, so it's built on a stronger foundation. We've done the entrepreneurial stuff. We know we can do it. So how do we scale it? So now it's almost like he's handed off to the next person, and that's how it should be.
That's very much the journey we're on, right? We're at 50 people now.
Wow.
So we've gone through, and then there was a point I could do everything. I could be the HR guy and the finance guy, and even work on the odd project. I think, now it's how do this. That's not an approach. It scales. We've recently hired a head of finance, head of applied AI. We've got a dedicated guy working in sales now, Dan. So we're looking at how do we scale this thing, how do we actually pull people into the business that are better than we are at these things. That can take us to that next level of maturity. So that's. It's an interesting journey, isn't it? And it is hard to let go sometimes, but you have to if you want to get to that next level, right?
Well, it sounds like you're doing all the right things. You're educating yourself, you're learning, you're remaining humble. So for me, it's it's great to see your business grow, and great to see you taking risks, work with some great organisations. I know you can't say them all online, but whatever. But it's been a great and a pleasure to get you on the sofa finally.
Yeah,
and I'm sure next time we get you back, you're like, I'm at 500 now, because you guys are absolutely flying. So thank you for spending the time and sharing a little bit about data and making right decisions, but your personal journey as well. And long may it continue.
Thank you so much, Daryl. It's been really good to talk to you. As always, I'm sure we will continue to work together. You guys doing amazing things with the podcast as well. Like and subscribe.
Well done. We'll put that out there. We'll put that on the B-roll at the end. Like and subscribe, Dave. But no, I really appreciate it. So thanks for taking the time.
Good stuff. Thank you, mate.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Purpose People podcast. How you can help us is to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, Google, and Amazon. That helps us get our message out there to help people go after their dreams, double down on it, and be successful in life on their terms.